The history of Spanish Sicily reads like a tragic opera. Kings, popes and bandits vie for power, and the poor people suffer. The Sicilian Vespers had left a fixed battle line between the Sicilians and the Aragonese on one side, known as Catalans and Ghibellines, and the Angevins, the Vatican, and the original Sicilian barons, which included the Chiaramonte family, and France on the other, also known as the Guelphs. Frederick IV reigned over Sicily from 1355. His reign suffered from two issues: tension with Naples and the Black Death, which was plague. He managed to agree a peace treaty in 1372 with Naples and the Pope, Pope Gregory XI, quite a result. Significantly, in this period, Pope Gregory XI, the last French pope who had recently been based in Avignon, France, moved back to the Vatican in Rome in 1377 and died shortly after. To learn more about La Bella Sicilia, consider subscribing. Frederick IV's daughter was Maria, Queen of Sicily, was a child, so 4 powerful families ruled on her behalf, including the Chiaramonte family. Milan, Naples, Aragon and the Pope looked covetously upon Maria and the strategically important island of Sicily. Prior to Maria's marriage to Gian Galeazzo Visconti, Viscount of Milan, she was abducted and taken to Spain to marry Martin, King of Aragon. Once married, Martin invaded Sicily in 1392. Now crowned Martin I of Sicily, he immediately began to exploit the island commercially. He brought with him waves of Spanish families who he appointed to administrative roles. Martin I won the Battle of Sanluri in a campaign in Sardinia, but subsequently died of malaria in 1409. His father, also known as Martin of Aragon, briefly ruled as King of Aragon and Sicily. Further jockeying for power in Sicily ensued. The island had descended into chaos again. The Spanish kingdoms of Aragon, Catalonia and Valencia appointed a new King of Sicily in 1412, Ferdinand I of Aragon. In 1416, Ferdinand's son, Alfonso V of Aragon, Duke of Penafiel, gathered the barons in Castel Ursino, Catania, to swear loyalty to the king. Sicily had lost the independence it had gained through the Sicilian Vespers. The viceroys now governed Sicily on behalf of the royal court in Spain. They were unable to satisfy both the competing demands of the Spanish as well as those of the Sicilians. The king gave gifts to loyal servants, but also deployed agents of the Spanish Inquisition who would at times contradict the viceroys. Sicily was rapidly becoming ungovernable. All this time, Sicily was being exploited commercially and geographically to spread Spanish influence through attacks on mainland Italy, Florence, Genoa, Milan and Venice. Alfonso V was very cultured and commissioned the first Sicilian university in Catania in 1434. He reunited both Naples and Sicily, despite resistance from the Italian mainland, from Genoa, Milan, and also the French, and the Pope. He died in 1458, leaving Naples to his illegitimate son, and the rest of his kingdoms to his brother John. The primary foreign merchants were Spanish, brought into powerful roles by the kings of Aragon and Spain. Bankers from Genoa supported the king with credit on the condition that food and agricultural products were exported from Sicily to the Italian mainland. The ability of the king to agree treaties, be it political, military or economic, was subject to parliamentary approval. This meant that control of the island of Sicily was concentrated amongst a small group of barons. During this time, Antonello da Messina was Sicily's greatest artist. He was a painter from Messina who is credited as having introduced oil painting to Italy. Sicily was devastated by the Spanish Inquisition, which had its base in Palermo from 1487 in Palazzo Chiaramonte Sterri. It terrified all levels of the population. In 1492, King Ferdinand II of Aragon expelled Sicilian Jews. During this period, the concept of Sicilian identity began to emerge, completely separate from the multiple different invading powers. Catalan and Aragonese were spoken at the royal court, whereas Sicilian was used at the parliament and in the wider population. In 1509, Viceroy Ugo Moncada renewed attacks on North Africa from the base of Sicily. He began to assert himself against regional barons, sifting out earlier corruption, imprisoning nobles and confiscating wealth. A riot broke out in Palermo and the city cannons were pointed at the Viceroy's palace. Moncada fled to Messina and his palace was looted by soldiers and citizens alike. Wheat was exported from Sicily, tax-free, at a time the island was literally starving. This was not the only time that this would happen in the history of Sicily. Tax collection and associated accounting was also largely overlooked, as there was misappropriation of large amounts of wealth and associated corruption. Rural areas were suffering depopulation and were largely ignored, and the law only applied in the cities. This criminal underclass in the countryside would haunt Italy for a long time. Regional landlords ensured they controlled the rights to grind wheat, make bread, slaughter animals, press wine and oil. The middle class were advancing their interests and the poor were penalised. At times, towns were sold into servitude in return for loans to the king, and then the same towns needed to work their way to their freedom. In 1517, an Italian was appointed Count of Monteleone. He soon fled to Messina. Monteleone was subsequently placed back into power through oppression of the population that had initially rejected him. Sicily was now largely ignored by its Spanish Castilian rulers as an independent colony which was just used for gaining wealth. The aim of the viceroys was restricted to keeping order and feeding those who supported the Spanish rule. It was a corrupt court whose main interest was extracting as much taxation as possible from the island. Castilian replaced Catalan as the language of the administration. In this period, religious leaders were exempted from the law. The regional barons passed on any taxation they received from the tenants of their land. The ruling families were loyal to the king and the king alone. While the poor were taxed, they had no legal representation. They worked long hours and died of hunger and disease. Between the years 1512 and 1560, there were numerous uprisings. And of course, Barbary pirates were typically supported by foreign powers, but they were also supported by some rich Sicilian families. The Spanish were well aware of this and invested heavily in defending Sicilian ports and coastlines from pirate attacks. Sicily was used as a base to combat the Turks and establish garrisons on the African coast. For example, Sicilian boats were used during the long naval battle of Lepanto in 1571. Charles V spent his regime defending against Protestant Reformation, the Ottoman Empire and the French. He also decreed that any captured infidels would become slaves, and one of these was Saint Benedict.